The 2010 we actually put in an orchard, small orchard. I'd heard about a company that St. Lawrence Nurseries in upstate New York. So hat tip to them. They've got great winter hardy trees, and we brought some out here. And they were doing very well out here till the gophers ate them. But that's a whole nother story. But so we put in an orchard, and there was all kinds of stuff we were doing at the time. We were starting to enjoy the cabin. We were staying in it. It didn't have insulation, or I was just starting to get the insulation in. There was no paneling, none of that stuff. And that summer, I started exploring using a chainsaw mill. So this would have been 2010. I think in June or July, probably July of 2010, I got a Granberg small chainsaw mill set up, and I had a small 45cc chainsaw, I think it is. It's a Husqvarna 455 Rancher. I bought it new, I think, in 2010. Anyway, that saw's been great, and I started chainsaw milling with it, and through the fall of 2010 and the fall and winter of 2011, I was running that chainsaw mill and I milled up quite a few logs with it, and I got my stepson Josh using it as well, and we made a lot of lumber with that chainsaw setup. I mean, it was a small saw with not a lot of power, but I put 10-degree chains on it, and it worked. You could do it. You had to be patient. It was slow. Certainly a bigger saw would have been better. I've got a 75cc Husqvarna now, 576 XP. That would have been great. Put a 2-foot bar on that, and it would have ripped through those logs a lot faster. But I didn't have it at the time. And one of the things that became clear to me was that chainsaw milling was a slow thing to do. You got to get the logs, and then you get the logs, you got to set up your ladder on them, and then you make your first cut, which with a little chainsaw can take a couple minutes or more. I think it probably took 5 minutes or more a cut, right? Taking nearly an hour just to mill up one log. It works. You can definitely make lumber that way, but it's a slow process. So at that time, I had been a member on Forestry Forum for a little while, and had been getting a lot of advice and information from a lot of the guys on Forestry Forum. And I'd begun to think that maybe the answer was not using a chainsaw mill, but using a bandsaw mill. And I had priced out the cost of the knotty pine interior for a cabin this size, and it was going to run me about $5,000 at the time to buy knotty pine for the interior of the cabin. Little did I know that was going to be a life-changing event, because I had heard about wood misers through the Forestry Forum. So hat tip, Forestry Forum, wood miser, give them some kudos. They probably sold a lot of sawmills for wood miser, but also other companies as well. But in any case, I'd heard about wood miser, so I looked on the wood miser site, and the price to buy a new LT10 sawmill, I think with a 7-horse motor and 2 7-foot rails, was like $29.95 or something like that, and priced out, shipped with at least 10 bands. I think it came out to $3,500. Well, when you consider that I had been chainsaw milling, so I understood that I could make lumber at this point, and I understood the value of making lumber, and considering the cost of knotty pine for the interior would have been $5,000, $3,500 versus $5,000, it's kind of a no-brainer. And I was using the Jeep as a log skidder, so I could get logs to the mill. And so we went ahead and we took the last $3,500 we had in savings, and we bought that little LT10. It got here February of 2011, and even though the roads tend to be pretty bad around that time of year, I dragged it out here, chained up the Jeep, and Josh and I pulled that thing out here, got her right up here. And I think we got it up here and got it off the trailer one weekend. And then I think like the following weekend or 2 weekends later, we were back out and set it up. And one of my neighbors, Gordy, came down. And Gordy, it was curious, he wanted to see the setup maybe. But he came down. He ended up helping us. I think Gordy might have helped us. And I think Richard helped us too. Honestly, now I'm going to have to go back and look at the pictures. I'm getting old and my memory's fading a little bit. So I think it could have been Richard too. But in any case, we got the sawmill set up and we cut our first logs on it. And oh my gosh, it was so much faster, so much better, so much more efficient. You didn't have such a big kerf. Oh, sitting in front of the wood stove, I had to take my heavy shirt off. It's getting a bit warm, which is perfect. I need the cabin to warm up. All right, so we got the Wood-Mizer LT10. We got it set up. We milled our first logs. And boy, there was no turning back at that point. Now we had good quality lumber coming off at a rate considerably faster than the chainsaw mill. We didn't have a 1/4 inch kerf loss every cut. It was less than 1/8 of an inch. And so we were maximizing lumber coming off those logs, and we could take flitches off 4 sides and easily build a cant faster than we could make one cut on the chainsaw. And so we started milling lumber. And I think in early March, my stepson and son-in-law and I came out, and Josh actually ran the sawmill a bunch, and between Josh and James and I, we milled up probably about 1,000 board feet of lumber that weekend. And that's when you're sitting there looking at a stack of lumber that's 4 feet tall and almost 4 feet wide and 8 feet long. I mean, there's just something that you just can't help but love about that. And so we continued to do that. We would come out, cut down some trees, mill up some logs, make more lumber. And I need to remove a couple things about cutting down trees. Some people watching this might be thinking, don't cut the trees down. Well, if you look at Colorado and all the beetle kill, you have to. There's certain things that have to happen, especially in an arid pine forest. Arid pine forests naturally burn about every 5 to 7 years. That's, just what the scientists say. We're supposed to believe the science. I don't doubt it. So knowing that, there are some things you can do. Number 1, clear the underbrush, get rid of the excess fuel. 2, remove trees that are too close together and get about a 15-foot spread between the trees on your property. This will help slow the fire down and prevent it from moving too fast, jumping tree to tree to tree. The other thing it does is it protects against the boring pine beetles. So pine beetles, the easier it is for them to travel from tree to tree to better. And with a 15-foot spread, it's not as easy for them to travel tree to tree. Come on, you're talking a little teeny little guy. So that actually helps as well. And on top of that, if you're planning on putting in solar, it's a good idea to remove trees to the south of where those solar panels are going to be so that they don't get shaded by the sun. Otherwise, you're not producing solar power. So we would thin out forests and remove trees and work on milling those up for lumber. And then I got a $200 Ryobi planer, a 13-inch planer. And I bought a plunge router off Craigslist for $50. I got some rail and style router bits, tongue and groove router bits probably from Rockler. And I just started trying to make tongue and groove paneling. And in the beginning, I took an old desk that my father-in-law had been using in his reloading room, and I basically drilled a hole in the middle of it and drilled some holes to mount the router and literally screwed the router to the bottom of it and adjusted the bit up through it, and then built a I built a fence. I started making tongue and groove. And the funny thing is I actually built it backwards, and I was trying to cut them on the wrong side. It worked okay, and I built this wall here was built on that setup. We planed everything down. I was milling it 3/4 inch, I think 3/4 of an inch, and getting us down to about 5/8, and they would dry, but ponderosa pine doesn't shrink much. So we'd plane it down to 1/2 inch and then put a tongue and groove on them and then stick them up on the wall. I think I built that wall of April of 2011. So we bought the mill in February of 2011, and in April we were building a pine, paneling wall. Then I got a router table for the Ryobi router and built a couple more walls using the router table before I gave up using a router table to do it and moved to the quick clamp setup that you see me using on some early videos probably 5 years ago. So I just, I would make paneling and bring it, and I, at that point, I think I started making paneling at home. I didn't have a shop. I didn't even have a garage. I had a shed that I could put stuff in, so I would put lumber in it or something, and I had a tent, a shed tent that I put tools and lumber in, and I would, plane the boards down, and then I would put tongue and groove on them and stack them up, and the next cabin trip I'd load up the Jeep and away we'd go. And around, that was, 2011, so 2012, around 2011 or 2012, I bought a pickup. Made it a lot easier to haul lumber back and forth. So I think that's when I started doing it. It would have been around 2012. And by then we had the wood stove, we had paneling and insulation. We had a running water system that I'd built. We'd plumbed in the cabin with water, and I set up an RV type water system. I had an RV pump running off 12-volt battery. Had a 55-gallon drum that we filled up from a cistern up above us. All right, well, So I guess the message here is that from 2009 through 2012, so a 3-year period, we went from buying lumber, trailering it up behind the Jeep, and building the cabin, to milling our own lumber and drying it and turning it into tongue and groove paneling and putting it on the wall. So that's an amazing thing, I think, that anybody can do. I'm not saying it's an amazing on me, pat my back. I'm saying it's an amazing thing that anybody can do. You can do this. I'd never run a sawmill myself. It wasn't like I was an experienced sawyer. I wasn't a super experienced carpenter. In fact, I would never have called myself a carpenter. I did some framing for several months when I was in my early 20s. Here I am, 20 years later, and I was framing a cabin up. I understood the concepts, though, by then, of course, So, anybody, you can do it. You can absolutely do this. And honestly, I've said it was a 12-year build. This has been a 12-year build. 12 years is a long time. But that's part of the point, I think, for me. And it's not for everybody. But for me, it's become a hobby. My stepfather, John Strain, wonderful man, rocket scientist of all things. I used to joke with him all the time. It doesn't take a rocket scientist. Oh, well, okay, I guess you are one. Not the greatest joke in the world, but it was fun for me and him. But In any case, he had said to me that if you want to have a healthy retirement, if you want to be able to retire someday and be healthy in retirement and not just, fade away. A lot of people retire and end up sitting in front of a television all day long. They don't know what to do with themselves. He said, you have to have things to do. And he said, so that's why I bought 5 acres for my retirement, so that I could build a house on the 5 acres and I would have something to do in my retirement. I'd have to prepare the property. I'd have to turn it into a place that we could live in, and so on and so forth. So I always told him, well, we bought 20 acres, so I'm going to live longer. But in any case, this has become part of what I do, right? I find it enjoyable. Yes, I come out here and there are challenges. This weekend I came out, and after relaxing in the cabin for several hours, I was going to the back of the cabin over here by the bathroom to get a bookmark for my book. I'm reading The Lord of the Rings. I've read it many times. I'm reading it again just because it's something enjoyable to do sitting at the cabin in front of the wood stove. And I heard a drip sound. And I thought, well, that's odd. What the heck is dripping? I mean, that kind of freaked me out a little bit. And I went in the bathroom. And the bathroom sink was completely full of water and overflowing. What the heck? So, now bear in mind... Good old coffee pot. Bear in mind that I had winterized the cabin. I'd blown out all the lines, turned off the main valve, put RV antifreeze in the drains. The cabin was prepared for winter the way I've been preparing it for winter for a decade. And it didn't make any sense. I'm still not sure what happened. I think I know. I think that the main valve must have failed somehow. It got very cold up here. I've been in -20 before up here and not had a problem, but something failed. Something caused the system to overflow somehow. Now, I will tell you, when I open up taps, there's no water coming out of them, so I'm still not entirely sure where that water is coming from. But clearly, water was getting past the main valve somehow, and I think it's possible that it got cold enough up here for whatever reason. Maybe there wasn't enough snow cover, that the main valve maybe cracked or something. I don't know. It's possible. In any case, it could be that the main valve was just dripping a little bit. And over the course of a few months, there was just enough trickle of water that enough water got into the lines, and I had left open the bathroom taps. I do that sometimes, and I've often gone back and forth over whether that was a good idea or not. In this case, I've determined that it is not a good idea. Thank you very much. In the past, I thought maybe it would be a good idea. I'm not even sure why. Honestly, at this point, I'm looking back thinking that was a mistake. And I can't tell you why I thought it would be a good idea, but it wasn't. Clearly because enough water dripped through that it didn't just fill the sink. And that's the thing to understand. What it did is it was draining enough in the warmer weather that it would get into the pipes, into the gray water drain system, and freeze. And get in and freeze, and get in and freeze, until obviously it plugged up the gray water drain system. And then it just backed up until it was flooding in the bathroom. Now, looking at it last night, it doesn't look like it was flooding very long. It looks like it just started like this weekend, maybe even. There wasn't that much water on the floor, and I don't think much came through the floor. I think it would have frozen. So I think I got lucky there. I think it was just a good soaking this time around. But that's the kind of thing that can happen. You just never know what's going to happen. And that's now another challenge, something that I've got to fix, something I've got to work on. This weekend, the mission, and it's not even a weekend, I guess it's a Monday now, but this week, my plan is to work on paneling in the porch and to work on the wainscoting along the bathroom wall here that my wife wanted me to do. So we'll do those, and then I will leave. So back to my original point of you got to have stuff to do and it becomes a hobby. That's part of having a cabin in the woods that you don't live at. I think a lot of people see the cabins, the pine paneling and the beautiful, setting. It's very romantic. And, and if you're a woodsman, you want to be out in the woods. A lot of people that want to be out in the woods tend to be doers anyway. They're people that are going to go do things and be active and whatnot. But I think there's a lot of people that look at cabins in the woods and think, oh my gosh, I wish I would have one of those. Out here, they call them winter kill. Those are people that buy a cabin in the woods and they say, I'm going to live out here. And in the spring, they sell it because it was a lot harder than they thought. So I think the message for people that look at cabins like this and think, gosh, I want to have a cabin like that. You might very well want to have a cabin like this, and it may be the best thing for you. I love them. I love this kind of stuff. But you have to understand that you don't just build a cabin and then now you can come out to it like a regular house in town whenever you want to. You're going to have problems. You're going to have wasps get in. You're going to have flies get in. You're going to have ants try to get in. You're going to have drains that mess up. You're going to have, water lines that mess up. I've broken a water heater. You've got windows that 10 years later don't open and close properly. You've got, solar stuff going on that you got to deal with sometimes, batteries that need to have water added to them. And I'm not trying to tell somebody you don't want this. I just think that it's best to go into ownership and building a cabin in the woods with your eyes wide open. It's beautiful. It's awesome. It's the most wonderful thing. I love it. I love coming out here and spending time in the cabin. Nothing better than sitting in front of a wood stove and reading a book and drinking a cup of coffee in the morning, not being in a hurry, having no internet. It's not uncommon, right? You get up in the morning, you check on your email, or maybe you're a Facebooker or something like that. I use MeWe. You get on MeWe, see what's going on in the world. Maybe you check the news sites. I don't watch regular television, so I don't get regular news. So I go to websites and I check and see what's going on in the world. And you do that. That's your morning routine, right? You get on your computer, your laptop, your phone, whatever it is. Maybe you get on YouTube. Hopefully you get on YouTube to see what I'm up to. And thank you, by the way. And while I'm at it, if you find this stuff useful, do me a favor. I would really love it if you would hit that like button. Just poke that like button for me. It really helps spread these videos around. It lets YouTube know that maybe somebody else might like to see it too. And don't be afraid to put some comments. Ask questions. If there's something you want to know about what I'm talking about, ask questions. But anyway, thank you very much for that. I appreciate it. Having a cabin in the woods is the most wonderful thing. I love it. I've always loved this kind of stuff. I still like camping. I still like to go out and do that kind of stuff. I'm in my 50s. I do less hiking. I should do more. I need to do more camping. I like that kind of stuff. Fishing, all that kind of thing. But cabining is different. It's not camping. It's more living. So if you take anything from this, I guess I would say it takes time, be patient, plan for what you're going to do, budget for what you're going to do, keep a book of everything you're doing. I have a book. It's actually down there. I'll have to pull it out, but it's called my cabin book. And it's kind of helpful. And then I have another thing. It's called my cabin box. And in my cabin box, there's things that don't fit in the book, plans and other things that just didn't fit in the book. And you keep all that stuff organized. I usually have it here. I think I took a lot of it home because we had a rat problem. So that's the other thing I would say, right? So be patient, plan, budget, and expect problems. things are going to happen. You're going to get rats and mice and wasps and flies and spiders and ants, and you're going to have animals try to live under your cabin. I've got rabbits right now trying to build a warren around the cabin, and that's bad for your foundation. They had gophers eat the fruit trees. You're going to have those things. We've had a couple forest fires, one that got within about half a mile as the crow flies. Pretty scary. That can happen. But you've got to plan for those things. You got to expect that and be prepared for it. And if you can't be prepared for them, at least know that something can happen. And you have to be prepared in the sense mentally that you're ready to deal with those things when they happen. Anyway, I hope this answers some questions. I know that there are several of you that watch my YouTube channel specifically for the off-grid cabin in the wood, the old Jarheads off-grid cabin. And I wanted to be able to kind of just sit down and talk a little bit about building a cabin in the woods and what it takes and what to expect and kind of how it goes, and kind of give you some of my thoughts about what it all entails. So if you've got some questions about the cabin, absolutely ask away. If you want to know some crazy stuff that's gone out here at the cabin, don't be shy. Ask. I have used a winch on a Jeep for things you should not be using a winch on a Jeep for, let alone on a cabin. So there's some crazy stuff that's gone on out here, and you may want to know. So ask your questions, and I'm going to answer them for you. You want some insider information, this is your opportunity to really seriously get it. So thanks for watching. Time for me to get back to some coffee, a good book, sitting in front of the wood stove. Y'all have a great day. The old Jarhead out.